Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Coaching Masters podcast. Now, we have been very, very, very fortunate over the last few weeks to be in the presence of the wonderful Diana Carmona. Lewis Raymond Taylor, the other co-founder of the Coaching Masters, Diana is his fiance, just in case you didn't know that, for anybody that doesn't know that. And they're both very, very, very close friends of mine and Claudia's. We don't get to see them enough, which is just, it's a real shame, but we do both live on two completely different sides of the planet. Me and Claudia live in London, England, and Lewis and Diana live in Bali in Indonesia. So we are like literally on the opposite side of the world. But when we are together in the same room, in the same place, we have an amazing time. And so they're very, very good friends of mine, let alone my business partner and people that I work with. But so we have been graciously gifted with the presence of Diana on this podcast for the last few weeks, the holistic coach queen here at the Coaching Masters. And she has been introducing everybody to some absolutely incredible holistic modality approaches to your coaching. You've learned a lot. There's absolutely no doubts about that. If you have not yet enrolled onto our 3-day completely 100% free training on how to earn an extra $2,000 a month as a holistic coach by offering holistic coaching as part of your business offering, as part of your coaching package, then you have to attend that free training. It's happening on Tuesday, the 8th of February. We kick off at 7 p.m. UK time, and it is a 3-day event, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So for those of you that are listening to this on the podcast, it will already be day 2 of that training. So the training has already started. That's okay. You know, it means that you can catch up on day number 1 and you can be there live for days number 2 and 3. So guys, this is what we're going to be talking about today on the podcast. So the title of the podcast is I Wish More People Would Think Before Speaking, because there is a huge difference between responding and reacting. A huge, gigantic difference. This is so simple, yet so powerful and so true, that the one major defining factor that separates us from animals is our ability to think about what we're thinking about. That is absolutely key. It's our ability to understand that we are thinking about our own thoughts. And therefore, if we can think about our own thoughts, we can decide how we respond to a situation opposed to simply reacting to a situation with our animal brains. If you walked into the middle of a field and you were standing amongst a herd of deer and you shot a bullet off into the sky and you fired a gun, all of those animals are going to have the exact same reaction. They are going to inherently react to the sound and they're all going to run. Not one of them is going to stop and think, do I need to be threatened by that sound? Where is it coming from? Who fired that gun? Am I in danger? Should I run or should I stay? Let me think about this for a minute. Is my thought process protecting me or is it putting me in a damaging and dangerous situation? That won't happen, because what will happen is that they will react, right? And they will all have an instinctive reaction. The thing that separates us from animals is our ability to think about what we're thinking about. So therefore, if we have that ability, we also have the ability to think about how we're going to respond to a situation, a place, a person, a thing, rather than simply reacting to that thing. So anyway, in one form or another, I'm sure that we can all relate to the idea of people thinking before they speak. But what I want to do is I want to utilize think as a bit of an anagram today, because there are 5 things that I think all of us should be doing before we respond, okay? Before we say anything, before we converse with another human being. That's one of my favorite words. It's just almost like it's something that's happening on a daily basis. It's something that's a huge part of our lives. And it's something that we don't often do skillfully. Now, there's 5 questions that I want everybody here to ask themselves before they speak, before they respond. And we can only become the change that we want to see in the world, right? That's what we need to lead with. So if we want other people to think before they speak. And when I say that, I'm talking about the anagram I'm about to introduce you to. We need to lead by example. We need to be the ones that create that change first, and then, only then, could we ever expect anybody else to follow suit, right? So what do I mean by think before you speak? Okay, now THINK. THINK. It's an anagram. It stands for something. Now, let's go through it. Before speaking, before responding, the first thing, the T in think, is it T true? T for true. Is it true? That's an interesting one, isn't it? How often do we respond with something out of emotion or instinct or anger or fear or jealousy or apprehension? Is it true? Because emotions and emotions that drive our response often will warp the truth in one form or another. Because what we want is we want our response to fit in with our version of the truth and not necessarily the ultimate truth. Now, the thing about truth is there are always three of them. In every situation, there are three truths. There's my truth, there's your truth, and then there's the actual truth, of which we will never truly know because we can only perceive the world through our own lens, our own version. We can only see the world through our own map of the world. But essentially, without going into it too much, we can only perceive the world through our own lens, which is built up based on our own beliefs, our own values, our own personal experiences, and therefore everybody processes the world, the external world, differently to the next person and the next person. A lot of the time we don't process it wildly differently to the point where what I'm looking at are two women standing next to each other, one's wearing a pink dress and one's wearing a white dress, but the next person next to me sees two men standing next to each other and one of them is 7 foot tall and the other one is 2 foot tall. It's not like we see these things wildly differently, and really you would have to actually be inside of the head of another person to even understand that, right? Maybe what I call green is somebody else's pink, right? Maybe what you call pink is somebody else's red. Maybe what I think is tall within someone else's world is completely warped and is something else. We don't want to get into this too philosophically, but at the end of the day, based on our values, our beliefs, our upbringing, we do see things differently and we hear things differently and we feel different emotions and different things, right? So therefore, there are three truths to every situation. There's my version of the truth, there's your version of the truth, and then there is the actual truth itself. Now, one thing that we can know about the actual truth itself is that, of course, we will never fully and truly understand what that truth is. But what we can attempt to do is we can attempt to see the situation through the eyes of the other person we're talking to, and therefore at least attempt to paint a bit of a clearer picture around what the actual truth is. It means that we will never really be able to do that 100%. But if us as coaches and as individuals who think about what we're saying and think before we speak, if we at least attempt to do that, then our response is going to be a much more well-rounded response that is going to be a lot more helpful, a lot more useful, and therefore is going to move the conversation or move the situation on in a more useful direction. So that's the first thing I want everybody to do. When we say think before you speak, the first one, the T, is truth. Is it true? Some things that you can do to kind of assist with that journey is it true to me, first and foremost? And am I being honest about that? Am I being completely 100% honest with what it is that I'm saying? And I can honestly, hand on heart, say that this is true to me, right? It's 100% true to me. Now, at this part of the process, we haven't necessarily tried to think, is it also true for the other person? I'm going to see it from their perspective. But before we even get to that point, a lot of the time, people say things that's not even true to them. They will say things for various different reasons that they don't believe to be true. Whether it'll be in order to elevate their status, whether it'll be to try to avoid a conflict, whether it'll try to avoid something that they deem to be shameful or embarrassing. There are all of these different reasons that we will say things that we as an individual do not even believe to be true. It happens on a consistent, constant basis. And what it does is it creates cloudiness and a huge lack of clarity and a massive amount of distrust between ourselves and the person we're talking to. Conflict, most of the time, comes from a lack of clarity. There are two individual people that are looking at the same thing and they're seeing that one thing through two different lenses, and they are arguing to the death about the truth, about what's actually there and what's actually correct and right and just. But the thing is, that's a dangerous fucking game to play, because what is correct and true and just for us doesn't necessarily mean that the other person we're talking to shares that same perspective. Always remember, when it comes to Batman and the Joker is not the villain inside of his own head. When it comes to Superman and Lex Luthor is not the villain inside of his own head. And for those people that don't know, these are just like the villains, right? The main villain against superhero. It's clear to us as the viewer that one is good and one is bad. But inside of the head of that person, they think they're doing the right thing. They think they're doing something that is for the greater good, right? Now, of course, a lot of the time, those individuals can have a really warped idea of that. And one very, very key thing that we can keep coming back to is it unnecessarily and uninvitedly infringing on the quality of life of another person? And therefore, we can kind of understand when someone is actually a villain. But one thing that we can't take away is the fact that there's my truth, there's that person's truth, and there's the actual truth, right? Now, us as individuals, as coaching masters, as people that want to be able to communicate in a much more effective and useful way, that's only the T in think, right? I've got 4 more for you. But even that one, if we could just ask ourselves that one question, then we are going to be in a much more empowered position when communicating with our fellow man and woman, right? Is it true? So the second stage to that is, okay, I've made the decision that yes, this is absolutely true in my world. And what I'm saying from my perspective is honest. Is it true in that other person's viewpoint, a map of the world? I can't ever really know that. But before I respond, I'm going to think about what it must be like from their perspective. And even though I can't ever really truly know what that is, I'm going to at least attempt to put myself in their shoes so I can gain a little bit of an understanding as to whether or not it's true for them also. Now, like I mentioned before, you'll never be able to fully do that and fully embrace that because you can't put yourself in that person's shoes and become that person and therefore see the world from their perspective fully. But we can at least attempt to do that on some level by asking the question, what is it like for them? What would they be seeing or hearing or feeling based on what I know about that person? And therefore, what I'm saying, not only is it true for me, but is it true for them also? Okay, so is it true? First and foremost, if I'm going to say anything, that's where I want to start. I know I'm kind of spending a lot of time on this first one, T, but fuck me, it's important. Like, it's really important. And it's something that, especially in 2022, right, in the age in which we live, where it's extremely easy to share. It's very easy to show everybody elements of your life and let people in. Truth has never been more important than right now, right? Because social media has been at the forefront of communication for at least the last 10 to 15 years now, right? So I remember in 2008, when I was 18, Facebook was like the thing, but it was brand new and everyone was only just moving away from MySpace, and MySpace was a big thing back in like 2005 when I was about 15 years old. So we're talking like the best part of 2 decades. Social media has been at the forefront of communication in this online space especially, but really the world now has moved into the online space. Now, over those 2 decades, when it first was a thing, naturally, what people really wanted to do is they wanted to portray themselves and portray their life in a way that wasn't 100% entirely accurate to what real human experience is. Now, naturally, of course, we still see a lot of this now today, right? Even nearly 2 decades on, it's still a huge thing. You know, when it comes to social media, the vast majority of people will portray a very particular version of their life rather than showing the actual life, right? Now, I'm here to let each and every one of you know that I can say from firsthand experience, the most captivating and endearing thing that you can do is tell the truth, because it makes you completely fucking different to everybody else. It makes you so unique in that space that you automatically separate yourself from everybody else, because the vast majority are not doing that. Tell the truth. Show everybody very openly, very transparently who you are, where you are, what you do, what stage you're at, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And I promise you, what you do is you separate yourself as a leader, because not a lot of people are used to that. And the second that you start to become fully transparent and honest, and what you say is honest and true. And you know what? It's really interesting. That's something I actually got from Ernest Hemingway, the writer Ernest Hemingway. And you're probably thinking, fucking hell, this is going in all different directions today. But this is so important. Ernest Hemingway, and I can't remember exactly what the quote was because it's probably been changed a little bit throughout time. But he said something along the lines of that powerful writing that will last forever needs to be honest and true. And that is exactly the same as when you're sharing elements of your life through social media or building a business or being yourself. This is 100%, no fucking doubt whatsoever, a huge contributing factor to the success of the Coaching Masters. No doubt. Because we, from the very, very beginning, have been very open, very honest, very true, exposing our flaws, letting people know who we are, and just not hiding anything, right? Just saying, this is us. And you've got everybody else who, you know, all these other coaching academies that are like hiding behind the suit and tie and stuff, that are not being fully transparent with who they are and where they've come from. And that's why the Coaching Masters has gone whoop and just shot straight to the top, because it's endearing, it's impressive, it's unusual. You know, people gravitate towards that. So anyway, I can't emphasize that first one enough. T in the think model, the think anagram, is true. Is it true? What I'm saying, is it true? And you know what? If it's not true, don't fucking say it. This is what we mean by think before you speak. Is it true? And if it is true, move on to the next section, right? The H. Is it helpful? This is so underutilized and undervalued. It's bizarre to me, right? Now, we live in this world at the moment, and I grew up with this in a big way, right? I'll tell you what I grew up with in a huge way. I grew up around a lot of opinions that were not built on any form of knowledge or experience, and were pessimistic, negative opinions for the sake of pessimism, right? Not based on going and finding out and having the experience and building the knowledge and talking to the network and collecting a series of beliefs based on actually doing something. It was pessimism for the sake of pessimism, right? Now, what was paired with that? This idea of, yeah, but that's my opinion, so I have the right to share it, right? I have the right to share it because it's my opinion. I have the right to an opinion, so I have the right to share it. Now, what my caveat is to that is, first and foremost, is it true and is it helpful? Because at the end of the day, if it's not true and it's not been built upon actual experience that you've gathered, and it's also unhelpful to share it, shut the fuck up. As simple as that. Because what's the point? What's the point? It will be this perpetual, this continuous cycle of misinformation and unhelpful information that is circulated time and time and time again, coming from individuals that have not built anything or not gained the experience, not fallen into the pitfalls, not had the achievements, not actually developed the knowledge and the experience required to be able to say what I'm giving you here is genuinely very helpful. But instead comes from a place of pessimism and a negative opinion just for the sake of sharing an opinion because you've got a right to do so. That, in my mind, is one of the most dangerous cycles that we continuously perpetuate. I think that's the word anyway, that we continuously allow the revolutions of time and time and time again. Now, if someone was to ask me my opinion of an area that I really don't know that much about, the first thing that I would let them know is, I have to tell you, I don't know a lot about this, right? So this opinion is not based upon anything really, but the limited amount of knowledge that I've gathered based on this conversation. I have to let you know that, because in which case, if I was to just share the opinion through a really strong sense, because I am allowed an opinion, I'm allowed one, it's my right, what the fuck good is that doing anyone? I'm not helping anyone in that situation. It's not helpful. So that is the H in think. Is it helpful? You're not responding or sharing just for the sake of the fact that you have a right to do so. Are you responding because what you have to say is genuinely helpful for the person that you're talking to? I am like, that is such a big thing for me. It's really very personal for me. Hugely, because when you receive a lot of information and when you receive a lot of opinions, ultimately they are not helpful whatsoever, because they have not been built upon experience and they have only been built upon pessimism and sharing an opinion for the sake of sharing it because I'm entitled to one. It completely and utterly misses out that huge second step of the anagram. Is it helpful? And in that case, no, it's not. So what's the point? We want to be responding in truthful, helpful ways. THI, right? Don't forget, we're going through think, we're going through the model. Is it inspiring? Now, this is one where not everything that you say is going to be inspiring, but we can at least ask ourselves the question, is it inspiring what I'm about to share with this individual person? Now, each thing that we do share with an individual doesn't necessarily need to be inspiring. It all comes down to the context of what it is we're talking about and who we're talking to. But if we at least ask ourselves the question, what will happen is that you will at least endeavor to attempt to say something that will inspire the person that you're talking to. And sometimes we will, and sometimes we won't. And even in those situations where it's not ultimately appropriate to be inspiring, if we at least ask ourselves the question, we are going to say something that is more profound than what we was going to say before. Even if we're just there to lend an ear. Even if we're just there to be a shoulder to lean on, even if we're just there to just be present, at the end of the day, we can still attempt to be somewhat inspiring and therefore help the individual that we're talking to move forward in some useful way. Is it inspiring? And you might say, what I'm about to say is not inspiring, and therefore I've answered that question. Yet, by asking yourself the question, is it inspiring? I can guarantee that in some way or another, it will alter what it is you were about to say and the way that you're about to say it. So that's one that's kind of optional, but it's optional upon the delivery of what you have to say, but at least ask yourself the question, is it inspiring? N in the think model, THIN. The N, is it necessary? Now, there are some intricate differences between is it true, is it helpful, and is it necessary? But really, it does deserve to stand alone. Is it necessary? As in, is it needed? What I'm about to say, is it needed? Does the other person need to hear it? And will it help move them forward and drive them forward within this situation or within their life in general? Is it necessary? Now, why is that one so palpable and so powerful and so current? Because do you or do you not currently notice a lot of unnecessary communication, views, opinions, hate, criticism, whatever way that you want to package that up, right? And whatever name you want to give that. In the online world and the offline world and the world in general at the moment, it's February 3rd, 2022. Do you not see a lot of communication that you would deem to just be completely unnecessary? There's no need for it. There's no purpose. It doesn't in any way drive the human race forward. It doesn't drive us forward. It doesn't help us. It doesn't assist anyone, and it is completely 100% unnecessary. I listened to an absolutely fabulous podcast the other day, and they were interviewing with a guy called James Clear, and he wrote a book called Atomic Habits, right? I've yet to read the book, but I will definitely 100% read the book, no doubt. He said this very, very insightful thing that really, really stuck with me in a huge way, and I really want everybody to embrace this. He said that whoever you choose to follow on Instagram and whoever you choose to be friends with on Facebook, what most people don't realize what they're doing is by choosing those people, they're choosing their future thoughts. And what he meant by that was we spend a lot of time scrolling through Instagram and scrolling through Facebook. And what we haven't ever really stopped to think about is what we're seeing on our news feed becomes our next thought. So you will inevitably think about what it is you've just seen on your news feed. So in which case, to give you an example, let's say you made the decision that you only ever followed chefs, right? Who uploaded recipes and what it was they were cooking that day. What you're doing is you're choosing your future thoughts. You're saying what I want to think about on a continuous basis in the future is food and recipes. And I want that to become my existence and my reality. And I thought that was the most profound thing in the world, because we don't often decide to follow somebody based upon the fact that we want their content and their thoughts and their beliefs to become our future thoughts. And of course, the reason as to why that is so unbelievably important is because of the formula that I talk about all day, every day, that your thoughts become your feelings affect your actions, and your actions affect your results. Therefore, if we go back to the beginning of that journey, by choosing to follow certain people on social media, we're choosing our future thoughts, and therefore we're choosing our future results. Our results are intrinsically linked to the people that we're looking at. It's exactly the same when it comes to news. This is my humble opinion, but it's not even really dependent that much on what news you decide to consume, because in one way or another, they're linked to the same animal, right? In one way or another, you will always be able to link it back to a very small handful of very wealthy individuals who have an agenda and therefore need the masses to think a certain thing in a certain way, in a certain order, in order to fit in with the agenda, right? So we're not going to get into that today because that's obviously a big topic. But depending on what newspaper you read, or what news channel you watch, or what news app you've got on your phone, you're choosing your future thoughts with those individuals, and therefore they are determining your future results. So I just thought that was really, really interesting. News feeds are very repetitive, and they are repetitive, and they're repetitive with those same things that we are actively making the decision, this is what I want to think about in the future. Fucking dangerous stuff, We need to take more control over what it is we are looking at, and therefore we're taking more control over our future thoughts and therefore our future actions and results. So really, really important. So yes, is it necessary? Now, there is a lot of completely unnecessary things floating around all of the time. Now, let me kind of flip that a little bit, because what I want to do is I'm always here to empower you, right? That's what I really want to do. I really want to empower you, and I want to encourage you to become the best version of yourself, to go out there, be the best coach that you can be, and therefore create a ripple effect in this world to help as many people as possible. Now, one way of kind of flipping that around in our heads is the understanding that there's a lot of stuff out there that is necessary for someone else's agenda. Now, they may be aware of this, they may not be aware of this, but we look at it and we're like, it's unnecessary. Now, it has a necessity, but it has a necessity that maybe isn't related to us or even works against us, but it's necessary to someone else's agenda. So what I want you guys to be thinking about is, think before I speak. Is it necessary, i.e., is it going to push all of us in an empowering direction? Right? Is it going to push all of us in an empowering direction? Is it necessary for the positive outlook and the positive action of everybody involved here? Is it necessary? Is it needed? Right? Now, I'll give you a great example, because how often do people say damaging things and nasty things to somebody else that makes them feel good temporarily, and they hide behind the blanket statement of they needed to hear that? Now, in that situation, who the fuck made the decision who needed to hear what in that scenario? Now, one thing that always really, really stands out to me as a coach is that term, they needed a good talking to. I would, as a coaching master, swap out the word talking with listening. They need a good listening to. Most people really and truly need a good listening to. That's what they need. They don't necessarily need a good talking to. That person needs a good talking to. Let's replace talking with listening. That person needs a good listening to. Because all too often, that's what we're lacking. That's what we're missing. We're waiting for our turn to speak. We're waiting to show the world how smart we are. And we're waiting to show the world how we've got all of this insightful experience that we need to share. But in reality, we don't. We've just got a pessimistic opinion. So think about that for a moment. The vast majority of people in reality need a good listening to. They just need to be listened to, right? Now, in response to what it is that we're going to say after having genuinely listened to them, we want to ask ourselves the question, is it necessary? Is what I'm about to respond with needed? Is it needed? Is it necessary? Is there a genuine, true, value-driven, forward-thinking, positive, necessary need to say what I'm about to say? Or, if I'm being completely honest with myself, am I only saying it because it's actually going to make me feel a little bit better? Because actually, I'm just giving them a dig. I'm digging them out a little bit. I'm saying something that I know is going to be a bit offensive to them, to get under their skin, because they've, for whatever reason, got under mine. And then I'm going to pretend that it was needed. Oh no, but it was really needed. He really needed to hear that. Now, every so often, there may very well be situations where the reality in which somebody is living in is really and truly damaging them, right? Now, there are loads of scenarios that we can think of, right? Where someone is actually, the reality in which they are currently living in is damaging to them and people around them, and is just overtly dragging them and everybody else down, and is a really shitty, bad situation, right? And in those situations, there are moments in which there are things that are hard to hear, but are necessary to say. Those situations exist. There's no doubt about it. They exist. But I believe that deep down, we know when we're sharing one of those compared to when we're sharing something that we know is actually just going to be a bit offensive and a bit upsetting for the sake of really kind of just having a dig. And it's not really necessary and it's not really needed. But a lot of people hide behind that statement, but it was needed. They needed to hear that. When in reality, those moments should really be reserved for those situations where that person is completely clouded in their judgment and they're really hurting themselves. And therefore, a hard truth is something that can be shared and we can rightfully say it was necessary. It was true, it was helpful, it was inspiring, and it was necessary. But think about the other ones for a minute. True, helpful, and inspiring. Now, if something is true, it's helpful, and it's inspiring, the chances are, by that point, it probably is necessary to be said. But what we need to do is we still need to check ourselves. We need to check ourselves, right? Because that's a very, very slippery slope that we can definitely fall into. Is really convincing ourselves that what was said was needed, when in reality, it was not coming from a useful place or a place of necessity. It was coming from a selfish place of just trying to make ourselves feel a bit better temporarily. And that's, it's a distinction that we need to make, but it's an important one. And then finally, just to round all of this off, which is it's just a very nice cherry on the cake, because if we can also say yes to this one, then we know that what it is we're responding with is genuinely a good thing. The K in think, right? We've done THIN. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? The K is it kind? Is what I'm saying kind? Now, the reason as to why this is a very, very important one to finish on is because we can convince ourselves that something is true, that something is helpful, that something is inspiring, because we can convince ourselves that a kick up the arse can be inspiring. We can convince ourselves that it's necessary, and still it can be unkind. Still then, it can be unkind. And this is why this is the last one, because this is that final check. This is that final barrier that is stopping us from sharing bullshit, stopping us from just fucking digging someone out for the sake of it. Because we can say, you know what? Yeah, but what I'm about to say is true. And you know what? And it's going to be helpful for you in the long run. And you may even be inspired by it because it's going to give you a kick up the arse. And I think it's needed to say. And we can still say something that is just straight up unkind. And there is no need for that. Ever. Any fucking need for that. When we're conversing with people that we like and we love and that we respect, that are our peers or our family, you know, there is no need. Complete strangers. Kindness to strangers is one of the most significant things that is completely lacking within the human race as a whole on a huge fucking scale. And I have a theory behind that, and I call it detachment theory. Detachment theory is the reason as to why there's a lot of road rage, right? Because when you're on the road, you are inside of your pod, which is your car, and there are these other individuals who are inside of their pods, and you can't see them and you don't know them. So you don't know what their beliefs are, what their values are. You don't know what they've been dealing with that day. You don't know what they're thinking about. You don't know anything about their history. So cars are such a fantastic example of pure detachment. There is pure detachment between you in your car and someone else in their car. And what detachment creates is it creates aggression and it creates animosity. And that is because that individual over there that I'm completely detached from, not only is there no need whatsoever for me to know them, like them, or trust them, or respect them, but our animal brain, in one way or another, also makes the assumption that they're a dick, basically, right? It makes the assumption that they're a fucking horrible person and that they're a threat. So our animal brain makes the assumption that that person in that car who I know nothing about and I'm completely detached from in one way or another is a threat. And so that detachment theory creates this really awful problem where for the most part, a huge amount of people are not kind to strangers because being a stranger, that detachment theory kicks in and they're away from us. Someone who you could very easily get in a confrontation with on the road, the moment that you sit down opposite that person and share a coffee with them, the chances are it would be completely different, right? The chances are that you could actually become friends with that individual relatively quickly. But prior to that, when you've got these two individuals that are just in their cars and there's pure detachment going on, that's the fucking animal brain, for some reason, makes the decision that everyone's hostile and a problem and a threat, and therefore we need to be aggressive. And it's just absolutely absurd. So anyway, is it kind, right? Is what I'm about to say kind? Now, I'll give you a great example of that. My friend James, he's a great forward thinker and he's a philosophical guy and he's not a coach, but he would make a fantastic coach. He's got this car and he loves this car. He's got this Jaguar. Someone crashed into his car, right? Now, the guy got out of the car and in immediate detachment theory, fucking typical classic, he's like being aggressive and angry. And James was just like, it's all good, mate. It's all cool. Don't worry about it. It's a car. You're okay. I'm okay. It's all good. How are you feeling? You all right? Bit shaken up? Do you want to talk about it? You want to sit down? And of course, immediately, the aggression was completely fucking stamped out. But not a lot of people would have the ability to do that in the face of that kind of situation. It dissolved the detachment theory, completely dissolved it, because all of a sudden there was an emotional attachment to the individual he was talking to. Is it kind? Is it kind? So guys, that's what I want everybody to do here, is I want everybody, because you're coaching masters, I want you to think before you speak. Think before you respond. Ask yourself, what I'm about to say, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? And if you can truthfully say, hand on heart, that it ticks all 5 of those boxes, then I can guarantee you will become one of the most interesting people that everyone who ever meets you has ever met. Because you will be completely different to the vast majority of people who allow their animal brain to engage and kick in and react to situations instead of responding, you will be very interesting and you will be very charismatic. And I can guarantee you, if you follow those 5 things, you will be considerably more successful than everybody else that doesn't, because opportunities will show themselves to you and they will arise. People will enter your life that you weren't expecting, and that person will present opportunities with you, and you'll build relationships and you'll have great conversations and you'll add value to the world just by making sure that you're ticking those 5 boxes before you respond, before you say anything. You will become completely unique. You will become extremely charismatic, very special, very different, and it will put you in a really strong position. And I'm talking everyone you speak to, even people that are getting under your skin, even people that you don't like, people that you have to deal with, that you wish you didn't have to. And you will want to go against some of these. You'll want to say something unkind. You'll want to say something unnecessary. You'll want to say something that just puts them down. You'll want to say something that isn't helpful. You'll want to fucking say something that isn't true just to hurt them. Because that's your animal brain wanting to do that. But if you relentlessly stick to those 5 rules and they become laws of communication with you as an individual, you will be utterly inspiring and utterly charismatic, and a better life is there to be had just by creating that change. I love you all. As always, you are incredible. You're powerful. You're valued. You're in the right place. This is your family. I love you all. You're amazing. Keep driving forward. Always tick those 5 boxes before you respond. Mwah, mwah, mwah. And I'll speak to you very, very soon. Keep coaching your way to freedom. See you guys.